They were never meant to be seen, not in ledgers, not in law, not in history books, yet their fingerprints are everywhere. Hidden accounts, secret deals, untraceable debts. We're told banking came from honest trade, merchants exchanging letters of credit, systems evolving toward transparency. But what if the real roots of modern finance weren't built in daylight, but in shadow? In the 13th century, Lucca was a small but fiercely competitive city-state in Italy, too small to conquer but too rich to ignore. Its power didn't come from armies. It came from paper. And in Lucca's stone alleys, elite families built something new, a system of invisible finance, shell companies and offshore trusts, centuries ahead of their time. No records, no names, just contracts, church loopholes, and plausible deniability. They didn't hide from power. They became it. In an era when charging interest was considered a sin and interregional transfers tightly restricted, the earliest international bankers needed a disguise. The solution was conceptually elegant. Wrap money in symbols of virtue. Contracts weren't written to explain. They were written to conceal. In 1380, Lucca's Guinigi family and a noble from abroad signed a document that, on paper, donated carved marble, bells, and incense to a French monastery. But hidden in the fine print was a method for transferring 2,000 florins to the French treasury, routed through church intermediaries. Because it looked like a religious gift, no official had the right to check if the marble or incense even existed. The contract wasn't a record, it was a cover. In another case, dowries were used to disguise large cross-border transfers. Back then, dowries weren't just for marriage. Families could also assign them to daughters entering religious life, like a nun in a Paris convent. A father in Lucca might say the dowry was backed by land, even if he no longer legally owned it. That land had usually been transferred already to a trust, a church contact, or a political ally. And often the money behind the dowry wasn't his at all. It came from outside financiers, other bankers, nobles, or church patrons, looking for a quiet way to move funds across regions. The father was just a legal front, wrapping the whole thing in the language of family and faith. The daughter, of course, never saw the money. It passed through her convent to someone already chosen, a bishop, a royal official, or a military financier. On paper, it looks like a moral gesture. In practice, it was a carefully staged transfer of anonymous capital, converted into political power without ever showing up in public records. In the medieval world, bankers often moved money through the church because secular law had no reach on church lands. Cathedrals, monasteries, and church courts followed their own rules. Records were kept in-house. Property couldn't be seized. Oversight was almost non-existent. That's how Lucca's bankers built what we might call a donation chain. A gift would start in Florence, pass from abbey to abbey, and finally resurface in Cologne, Seville, or London. Every stop looked like an act of charity, but no one saw the full route. It was an early form of religious trust, used by Crusader orders and Jesuit missions alike. When medieval banks collapsed, and many did, the damage often looked clean. Creditors lost money, yes, but the people who built the risk usually walked away untouched. Lucca's bankers had perfected something we now recognize: limited partnerships with silent partners. These weren't just passive investors. They were often the real decision makers. Never listed on official charters, never named in account books, and never sued when things fell apart. One of their key tools was a kind of paper entity created just to absorb loss. In a case from 1338, a Luccan bank declared bankruptcy after its Bruges branch failed to recover military loans to the English crown under Edward III. But investigators later found that 2 weeks earlier, the bank's main assets had already been moved, quietly, into a separate company based in Florence. Officially, that company had nothing to do with the bank. But its owner, a man named Bartolomeo di Salvestro, turned out to be linked by marriage to a powerful family inside Lucca's governing elite. The collapse was blamed on war. In reality, it was the planned sacrifice of a disposable entity. You didn't need to steal to win. You just needed someone else to take the fall. Finance and power were never far apart. But Lucca's banking elite pioneered a specific structure of municipal control via debt obligations. A banker would advance 20,000 florins in future taxes to the city treasury in exchange for political participation. In practice, this gave him leverage over city budgeting, judicial appointments, and regulatory votes. In some cases, bankers simply lent the city money and got council seats in return. Records from the period describe a banker who held 6 votes in a 9-member council. Despite owning no land and performing no official civic duty, his power came from paper, not prestige. The oldest surviving account books from Lucca don't show mistakes. They show design. By the 1320s, some banks were keeping 3 separate ledgers, one for the church, one for city officials, and one for the family itself. Each ledger told a slightly different story. The payment dates didn't match. Names were changed. Currencies were switched. It wasn't fraud. It was tailored reality, different truths for different eyes. One abbot's ledger had this note in the margin: the account is settled in heaven. The balance need not appear on earth. This wasn't carelessness. It was modular accounting, like today's internal spreadsheets versus public reports, or offshore books versus domestic audits. Lucca's bankers weren't hiding theft. They were hiding power. Fast forward to modern China, and the core tricks of Luccan banking are still alive. Not as relics, but as standard tools for the elite. China has a term, white glove. It means a clean legal figure, someone who does the dirty work for China's ruling families. Not a criminal, not a nobody, but a useful front, protected by legal gray zones and political silence. Take Ye Jianming, founder of CEFC China Energy. On paper, he was a private businessman. In reality, he had state-level access, cutting oil deals with foreign governments, brushing shoulders with top party officials. His company moved money through Eastern European banks, Balkan intermediaries, and shadow partnerships, even linked to Hunter Biden's deals. It looked familiar: scattered control, hidden hands, no fingerprints, just like Lucca. And when things got hot, he took the fall. The company collapsed. The money slipped away into trust firms, cultural centers, and silence. Behind it all, elite families, quiet, untouched, richer than ever. This isn't new. It's not even shocking. It's just the same old game, repackaged in Mandarin. Lucca's methods didn't die. They scaled. Today we call it shadow banking and offshore finance. Shadow banks work outside normal rules, but use tricks that feel ancient. SPVs, special purpose vehicles, take the fall when things go wrong. Derivatives hide toxic debt. Shell companies obscure losses. In 2008, Lehman Brothers used a trick called Repo 105 just before reporting earnings. They sold about $50 billion worth of assets to another bank, but only on paper. In reality, it was a short-term loan. They agreed to buy everything back just days later. But in the meantime, debt looked lower. Everything looked cleaner, right in time for the earnings report. The same play, just with modern paperwork. In 2021, the Pandora Papers showed world leaders used anonymous trusts in South Dakota, Dubai, and the Virgin Islands. By design. What started in Lucca as a workaround is now a system built to hide. This is not corruption. It's a design that shifts power beyond the law's reach. From medieval Lucca's cathedral vaults to modern global digital ledgers, contracts can lie. Ledgers can mislead. Today, we still talk about financial transparency, but that promise has become the best cover of all. Thanks for watching. If the crossroads of faith, ancient secrets, innovation, and wealth intrigue you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. See you on the next journey beyond the visible.